morning, Sharjah, and good morning, world. My name is Karine de Meijer, and I'm the CCO for the Women in Technology Global Movement. And I'm so honored to be able to moderate the opening panel of the second day of the Women in Tech Global Forum in Sharjah, which we are organizing in conjunction with the Science Research Technology Innovation Park, which is directed by Hussein Al-Mahmoudi, who we created a partnership with last year. This is our second edition. Of course, we are very sad that we are not able to be all together in one room, because when women come together in one space, amazing things happen. I am very honored to be able to moderate this panel, which has a topic, 1 decade to achieve the SDGs, and what's the roadmap to bridge the gap to STEM for girls and women. I actually studied women's studies myself at Harvard in beginning of 2000, and I went to a women's college. So I know all about gender equality, and remembering graduating in 1986, having a president say to us, I know one day one of you is going to be the president of the United States. That's the energy that I was educated with. And well, America now has its first vice president, and she's a woman of color as well. So, I mean, all dreams that I was educated with, it's now happening in America. And I know there are now girls all over the world thinking, I can be a VP one day too. So I happen to have been in the United States, in New York in 2015, when the SDGs were actually launched. And it is an impressive tool, I think, because for years, of course, with the Millennium Goals, which were not able to be achieved, there were very many intelligent people trying to look for a model that could work for everybody, for the NGOs, for the industry, for the governments, and also something feasible, also something that marketing-wise would be able to be communicated. And so they came up with these 17 goals, 16 actual topics, and number 17 being the partnerships, because you can have all these amazing topics, but if you do not work together and you do not bring industries together, you're never going to be able to achieve it. What I do remember from that session also is that I remember walking and leaving that room thinking, I didn't hear the word technology once. And how are you going to be able to actually achieve gender equality and education for all and connectivity and clean water and climate change, but not really embracing and bringing in technology into that space? So I was so incredibly grateful when I met Ayumi Aoki, the founder and president of Women in Technology in 2019, and when she asked me to join her on this mission to globally expand the Women in Technology Global Movement. And so I'm very proud to be opening this first session of the second day. And I want to introduce you to three very esteemed women advocates. First, I want to introduce you to Irene Natividad. She's in Washington, D.C. She's of Philippine origin. She was born in the Philippines, but she's been living in America for a long, long time. She's the founder of the Asian American Professional Women's Institute. She's a women's rights activist, and she's a president of the Global Women Research Education Institute, which organizes every year the Global Summit for Women. Welcome.
Thank you.
Then I want to introduce to you from Turkey, Sanjay Gulsur. She's an expert in gender equality, has been for a long, long time. She was also an award winner this past December of the Global Women in Technology Awards. And she's UNESCO's director on gender equality since 2004. Welcome.
Thank you, Karine.
And our third guest is Tuta Saad Kia, whom I met in New York in August of 2019 when she was still Consul General for Kosovo, a country that I, from the Netherlands, have a very strong connection with. And she's currently she's currently the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora for Kosovo. Welcome.
Thank you.
So in the preparation for this session, I shared some questions with you because I always think it's nice, if you're able to bring across something that really is important for you. And so I would like to start this session with a question. Irene, could you tell the audience something surprising about yourself? For example, why do you think you're in the position where you're now? What was it in your life or maybe in your childhood that really was a driving force for you? And what has been a unique quality in your professional life?
Well, I think people think that all I do is watch CNN and read the New York Times. It's not true. I actually watched HGTV to watch people cook and watch homes to be built. It eases my mind, if you will, when you think of all the issues. Somebody asked me once, was there ever a moment of epiphany when you decided to advocate for women? And there wasn't. It was more like a pattern. My doctoral dissertation was on female slave narratives. I was an English major, and it was a topic I had to fight for because it was part history, part literature. And then I moved from, teaching to administration, and I headed up a division of continuing education where the majority of the students were women who wanted more training, more degrees, etc. But on the side, I kept organizing. So inherently, I'm an organizer. I was in the Manhattan Women's Political Caucus. I was organizing politically, and I was also organizing women on economic empowerment issues. I ended up in Washington because I ran for president of the National Women's Political Caucus. I made a campaign promise that I would move to Washington, our headquarters, if elected. And then all of a sudden I got elected. And I'm going, oh my God, my husband has to change jobs. We had to sell our apartment in New York, and you never leave New York, if possible. But it gave a national stage to the things that I cared about. And then I moved from there to global, and I moved from politics to economics, because you can't do politics without money. And what I want is for women to have money, because when you have money, you have power. And it changes dynamics in any family when women bring income home to their families. So my academic training taught me how to articulate, how to say simply what are complex ideas, and to be able to use research as the basis for change. Mm-hmm. I use it as a tool. So that has been the foundation for some of the work that we do. So that's me in an eye blink.
Wonderful, thank you. So Gulsar, if I direct that same question to you, what is something surprising about yourself that you would like to share with the audience? And for example, what has been your passion or your drive, which brought you to the current position where you are, and what is maybe one of your unique qualities in that?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to clarify that I'm no longer the Director for Gender Equality at UNESCO. Okay. I served as the director from September 2004 until the end of August 2020. I am now free agent, but of course my work at UNESCO has been a very defining element in my career, and I'm very proud of what we have achieved at UNESCO together with other staff and with my team. I think what perhaps not surprising, but what is the defining characteristic that led me to where I am today is my curiosity in learning about others, other people, other cultures, other thought systems. And I can probably say that I have cultural fluency, which is one of my greatest assets. I have lived and worked in over 30 countries.
Wow.
In almost every continent except for Australia and New Zealand. I have started my gender work by chance, to be honest with you. While doing my doctoral research in field in sub-Saharan Africa on rural development, because I was studying political economy. So Irene, I completely agree with Irene that you can't really separate politics and economics from each other for any analysis that you want to conduct. So I came upon gender equality as an observation of what was happening in field during my doctoral research. Every time I wanted to talk to farmers, interview officials, I was presented with a group of men. So after a while, I started asking the question where the women are, especially in villages and rural areas that I visited. And the answer was, well, they are working in the field, so they can't come to talk to you. This is how I started getting interested in gender relations, gender division of labor, gender dynamics. And it led me to work both as an academic on these issues, but also as a development practitioner. I established and managed an international development consulting company in Canada for several years, managing projects in all corners of the world, really making important advances in terms of development thinking that includes gender equality considerations. I was the first social scientist in a World Bank project where gender equality became a very important element of the drafting of a national policy on water resources. I worked in Cambodia just after Pol Pot period to develop income-generating activities for veterans, for the disabled, mine victims, and for women as part of an Asian Development Bank project. And my work at UNESCO, which I started, as I mentioned, in August 2004, was really a continuation of my interest in others. I worked always with multicultural, multilingual, multidisciplinary teams. And at UNESCO, I had the opportunity to integrate gender equality into UNESCO areas, which include education, the sciences, culture, communication, and information, making gender equality one of two global priorities of UNESCO in 2007. This is before the SDGs, before UN Women was established. So I think my asset is that this broad worldview gives me the chance to bring together the North and South, the East and the West, and adopt and use a very inclusive, diverse, and culturally sensitive approach.
Beautiful. Thank you for that introduction.
Thank you.
Which resonates very much with my heart. I love it how you say East and West, North and South. It's beautiful.
Thank
so,
you.
Well, I would like to ask you actually the same. So tell us something surprising. I know a little bit about your life because you shared that with me. I remember in August, because you had your daughter with you, I remember. But I would love you if you share with the audience something surprising about yourself, and what do you think has been the drive or, like a unique quality in your personality which has gotten you to where you are right now?
Karin, thank you. I have to thank one more time Eileen and Women in Tech to get connected with you wonderful ladies. And I am recognizing my sentences in your speeches. And it means that we are a member of the same tribe. We are a tribe of people who believe in gender equality and who work building alliances. So thank you one more time. My name is Teuta Saachia. I am engineer, master in engineering. I am one of first programmers of PCs in Kosovo. I have a graduate certificate on gender and sexuality in Dartmouth College in United States. Everyone, not only in Kosovo, but also abroad, when they see me, they say, oh, okay, here she comes, the fighter for gender. Mm-hmm. And the sentence, where are your women, I used so much that people who know me, when they say, hey, let's find our women there because she will ask where our women are.
That's good.
I speak 6 languages. Turkish is also one of my language that I speak. And what are the qualities? I think that all my life I did things that I believe they are the right things to do. It brought me many times to a situation that was not comfortable, to be against the flow. But I never stopped, and I did what I believe is the right thing to do. I don't quit and leave unfinished business, and I was never afraid to try new paths. So I built computer centers, one of the first computer centers in Kosovo. And then I started my own business in radio communication, installing together, mostly men, in top of mountains or in cars or in roofs where many men didn't dare to climb. I installed antennas and showed that there are no limits if you want to achieve something. But in 2004, I entered politics because Kosovo emerged from the war as a war-torn country that needed to rebuild itself, that needed to heal the heart, that needed to build institutions, build the country. And in 2004, I entered the politics. In fact, politics opened my eyes about gender equality. I saw during the campaigns in politics that one mediocre man can get much more votes than an excellent woman. Mm-hmm. It is not only because of men, it's also because of women who have ingrained in their brains that these are men's jobs and women don't need to be there. And I put in front of myself work to empower women. And I strongly believe, I share with you too, that economic empowerment is the key. Because through economic empowerment of women, you need independent women who control their life, who can leave whenever they want, who has a less of violence because the criminal who beat her knows that she can go and leave him. So economic empowerment is the key. But I strongly believe that besides economic empowerment, we need empowerment of women within the politics. I was one of fighters for putting quota in Kosovo, in parliament and in municipalities. Every journalist was asked at the time the same question. Do you think that this quota will bring unqualified women instead of men?
Yeah.
And I always gave the same response with a question. Do you think that 70% of men who are sitting there are quality? I said no. So here you are. This is the answer. Fortunately, this quota created the critical mass. The critical mass of women within the parliament, within the municipality, within police, within the judiciary. And it was not anymore something unusual to see women to talk about foreign policy, to talk about energy, to talk about diplomacy, about telecom and other things. And I think quota in our country made a difference. But it's not only that. We need to continue to link that political power with the women in parliament to produce laws, to produce affirmative actions that will help women to grow economically and be more independent. I have 4 children. Did I mention? No.
No, that's your greatest achievement, right?
They will be angry with me.
Well, and you're a wonderful role model for your daughter. That I remember from meeting you. So I think that this gives the audience a wonderful, opportunity to sort of get to know you better. And now I want to dive in a little deeper into the SDGs because, of course, I mean, the number 5, gender equality, is not a standalone goal. I mean, you need to have the economic empowerment that we spoke about. You need to have the education. You need to have the connectivity. You need to have the safety. So, Irene, I would like to ask you the question. Of all the SDGs, which 2 or 3 do you actually feel most aligned to, and which SDG do you actually work with, on a daily basis?
Well, clearly SDG 5 on gender equality is my home.
Yeah.
But when you look at all 17 SDGs, women are central to the successful implementation of all of it. What's number 1? Poverty. Who are the majority of the poor? Women. And then the second one, preventing hunger. Hello, if you're poor, you're hungry many times. Yeah. Who are the majority of farmers? Women. Who are the ones so therefore, they're the ones who will be affected by climate change, the desertification of fertile land, which then causes migration, etc. So if you go down the line, access to healthcare, education, women are central to all of it. I always have a heart attack when people say, women and, as if somehow we are a separate segment. We cut through all of it. We are half or more than half of the world's population. So therefore, our impact is great. So it's, for me, it's SDG 5 is my home, but really, we impact on all of the SDGs. None of it will happen if women are not there. So,
Gulser, I know that I asked you the same question. Of course, you know, with your expertise on gender equality, that was a bit of a no-brainer. But what are other SDGs that you work with on like a daily basis, and which one do you think is going to be able to accelerate goal number 5?
At UNESCO, we really, as a UN agency, of course, we were mandated to look at all SDGs. Even though my area of expertise is women's empowerment and gender equality, so SDG number 5, one of the unique features of the SDG agenda is the fact that gender equality has a standalone goal, but it is also integrated into all of the other 16 sustainable development goals. This was the distinguishing aspect of the SDG agenda compared to the Millennium Development Agenda. At UNESCO, because of our mandate, of course, we were very much involved in the implementation of SDG 4, which is on education. And if you look at the objectives and targets of SDG 4, you will notice that almost every single target has a gender equality related aspect. And that was really the work of UNESCO, which was the technical agency tasked with preparing the element of SDG 4 through a long consultative process that involved all our 195 member states. It was really important for UNESCO to prepare something comprehensive and inclusive to present to the world approval, which happened in 2015. When you look at other SDGs, it's very obvious that all have some bearing on gender equality. I mean, poverty, if you look at the data about poverty, there is no doubt that you really have to gender equality perspective to tackle poverty issues. In terms of peace, justice, we know that you cannot really achieve lasting peace without gender equality, in the famous words of some of the one who fought and worked before us. In terms of water, natural resources, clean water and sanitation, they are all intrinsically related to women's livelihoods, women's rights, and their involvement is absolutely essential. So while we focused to some extent on gender equality, SDG number 5, we also made a very systematic and concerted effort to make sure that gender equality is reflected in the overall work of UNESCO, which contributes to almost every single sustainable development goal. So I can't really say more than that. Of course, we also report, UNESCO also reports on SDG number 4, which is the one on education. And just a few weeks ago, they launched another global monitoring report that gives the overall view of what is happening in the field of education. Now, if you had asked me this question last year, I would have said that education was going well, and we are making advances in terms of achieving parity, gender parity at different levels of education. But the report that was launched a few weeks ago indicates that COVID-19 had an incredibly negative effect on education. At the beginning of the pandemic, around 1.5 billion students had restricted access to education. Even though there were some improvements over the summer months, I think the situation is not getting resolved in the way that we hoped it would be. Even today, as we speak, 11 million girls may be affected very seriously to the point of not being able to go back to education when if things get back to normal. So even in an area where we thought we were going to make good progress, even if we were not to achieve gender parity, I think we are suffering setbacks. And I think maybe I'm jumping a little bit further into the discussion, but I think the pandemic has affected the progress towards gender equality in a very serious and unfortunately negative manner.
Yeah, that actually takes me to the next question. And Tota, I would like to hear your response on that, because of course I think that the pandemic has definitely impacted and halted actually, the sustainability development goals. I mean, I would love to hear all of you at the end. Do you think that 2030 is the right decade? This is the start of a new decade that we're now. I mean, it's probably gonna, we will probably likely need 5 more years in order to achieve it, instead of them looking for a new model again. But let's come to that later. So, Tota, I would love to hear from you. What role do you think that connectivity plays? I mean, when you look at the global roadmap, educating girls in STEM. I actually shared an article with all of you, which was just released this week by Harvard Business Review. A research that they did is that, during a pandemic, it showed that women actually outperformed men in very many leadership positions, but there was only one item or still where women actually are less, and that's with technology and expertise. So here you have it again. So Tota, I mean, how do you see that happening for the next 10 years? I mean, and what role does connectivity play?
When SDGs became the goals of United Nations, I think that nobody had idea of pandemics and how these pandemics will shuffle everything that we know, that brought us to the completely unknown field when we need to really reinvent everything from the beginning. I think that this also have to do with SDGs, to reshuffle, to restructure, and to see how to adapt SDG goals. And the timeline of 2030 will be the time of achieving. When will gender parity become reality? When there will not be need for gender parity. When men will start to ask for their place that women are occupying. That will be the time. But I think that regardless of that, history told us that nothing goes smoothly and always growing. Mm-hmm. If we lose attention and if we lose the way to work about gender equality, that will decrease heaven. And there are many places in the world when we saw that. When there are no women with the parliament. I heard a woman in one conference from former Soviet republics telling when they removed the quota from their parliament, the next parliament was 100% men, and the first law that they passed was the law to be able men to have more than one wife. So, yeah. So you see that whichever institution that lack the presence of women will deteriorate and will not give full result. I have mentioned a publication of Georgetown University that took my quotation in that publication as a title is leaving women behind is like working with one hand. You cannot achieve 100% of success if you work only with one hand instead of two, instead of using the full capacity that we have. Which is my favorite. We are a member of same tribe. I don't need to reinstate that SDG 5 is my favorite, but it's always connected to each another. In these new circumstances now, I think that SDGs and all our work need to be concentrated on future, because we are where we are and the old normal will never become the new normal. So SDG 4, quality education, is very important. Technology without quality education cannot be comprehended. You cannot have technology without proper education. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Women are those who usually are labor force that are not in a legal flow. They usually are small businesses or working completely out, and they were the first to be touched by these pandemics. They cannot help in economic growth and in women empowerment if we do not work concretely with SDG 8 and help that economic empowerment. Pandemics brought SDG 9, infrastructure and innovation, in the top of the list. Without innovation, quick innovation, fast forward innovation, we wouldn't have vaccines. We wouldn't have many things that made our life bearable in this confinement. So that innovation, again, needs to be put very high if we look forward, if we are in a position to restructure SDGs, the timeline of SDGs and other. Now we are in a campaign time in Kosovo, and the Prime Minister asked me to help him with a program of ICT. I'm very happy that the ICT is growing in Kosovo. The coverage, internet coverage penetration is 92%. It's like the most developed European countries.
Yeah.
It's per capita, we have the biggest number of engineers who are certified in world-renowned certification with Cisco, Juniper, ITIL, and others. But even in that, the participation of girls is going higher. But unfortunately, the number of girls in hardcore ICT, in software development, in researchers, in developers are still low. And I highly encourage the government to start from the first class, not in a first class of elementary school, but even before, to start with programming, with coding, to apply different affirmative actions for girls who are attending STEM universities, so they can become the next future force. By the way, the jobs in STEM are much more paid, higher payment than works that women are today doing. So I think that these SDGs linked together with other are really needed by UN, by all organizations, by media, by all to be reinforced.
Well,
Can I follow up on Tiyuta's comments? We are of the same tribe, and I love your analogy of the two hands. Janet Yellen, who was the former chair of the Federal Reserve Bank in the U.S., who's now the treasurer of the United States, when she was Fed chair, she gave a speech, and she said, America's prosperity from the 1950s to now was due to women going to work. And that if there are barriers that prevent their full participation, it is the economy of the United States that will suffer. It was an unusual comment for a Fed chair to make. Usually all they talk about is raising interest rates. But it's true, the reset economy after the pandemic cannot be successful without the full engagement of women. So, when we talk about we are the victims of the pandemic, it cannot be solved. The economy cannot go back to where it was before, at the very least, without women. And Karine, you were asking about connectivity and how I think digital transformation accelerated during the pandemic. Look at us. We're meeting across Zoom. And what it did was that it made remote work a reality. Lots of companies, lots of governments, lots of workplaces didn't want to deal with remote work. Now we know it works. And what it means is flexibility that we always fought for women in order to be able to integrate work at home and work at work. Unfortunately, when we asked for flex time, we didn't think about children being at home at the same time as well as your spouse. That was not the bargain we wanted. But in terms of workplace practice, that is a development that is positive. The other thing is that technology made contactless commerce happen. e-commerce accelerated, then frees men and women to not having to schlep to the store. You can now buy. You can make life happen with all kinds of purchases, large and small. Women may be techno-bobos, sometimes. I am one of those. But I was surprised to read that in e-commerce in the US, the majority of purchasers were seniors. They figured out how to handle technology, and they were buying groceries, they were buying everything. It surprised me because you would think it'd be the young people, right? No. Who has the money? Older people, right? They learned what they had to learn, and so they were the majority of consumers in e-commerce during this pandemic. So that was another development. The other one is the emergence of robotics. At Walmart, they now use robots to clean the floors, to do inventory checks, to refill supplies. In hospitals, they were using robots for basic care, if you will, And in Japan, the greeters at the door are no longer women. The one that say good morning, ohayo gozaimasu, robots. Right? And so all of those developments happened during this time when there were less workers. But those were positives, there were also negatives. The problem with remote work is that it tends to isolate people. When you're at work, you meet people in the elevator, in the cafeteria, you meet colleagues in a meeting that are not necessarily in your team. And there's a study that showed there's something called distance bias that impacts negatively on women and people of color who tend to be at the margins of leadership. And that losing that contact across disciplines, across functions, doesn't help women in particular. When you're looking at robotics, people used to sweep the floor and check on inventory and help in surgeries, etc. That's work that were done by people. And so there will be a transition period that may be severe when somehow all of this, this easiness that, apps provided replaces some workers, and they will to be women. In fact, I was at a meeting with a CEO of Airbnb who said, we're there to destroy the hotel establishment, democratize, hospitality. And I asked him, I said, when you do that, do you think about the women who clean the rooms, who change beds, who provide the food, who answer the phones, who sell your space, etc.? I said, what would you do with those women? And he said, yes, there will be severe transition. And it's something we have to think about, because technology, we cannot do economic empowerment of women without being part of technology development. So it has a plus, it has a minus, and that's something I wanted us to be cognizant of. And it was accelerated, as I said, during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask Gulsur that question also, because our movement was really built on the SDGs. And so, literally the 4 SDGs that you all mentioned in your own, talks are exactly the 4 that we have, that we are deeply connected with. And actually our movement grew exponentially during the pandemic because so many women were at home, they were behind their computer, and they were, really, longing for having a virtual connection and to be able to share everything. And so we grew from 12,000 followers to 50,000. And I know that this year it's going to be more. And before the pandemic, we had 12 up and running chapters. Of course, they were still able to meet in person. And now we have almost 20. And I think we have people coming from countries every week asking, to open chapters. So for us, it's been an incredible journey. But it also has showed that there's still a lot of women and young girls out there, that we need to bring into the equation. So Gulsur, if I ask you about how has technology changed your life, or also like the perception of the world to you? What opportunities has it actually created for you, and what can you give to everybody?
Well, as you know, one of the reasons I was honored with this award by Women in Tech as the global leader for 2020 is because of the work we did at UNESCO that I led in the last 3 years on digital skills, digital gender gap technology, and especially artificial intelligence, focusing on voice assistants. The way I look at technology is a little bit more complex, if I may put it that way. While I agree with the general lines of what my fellow panelists have said, I think we have to remember that technology does not take place in a vacuum. It's developed by human beings who live in communities and societies and who have different ideas, expectations, aspirations, but also different value systems and worldviews. So technology reflects the way it is developed. One of the problems we have in the technology sector right now is that it is not representative of the world we live in. In our work, in our research on digital gender gap, we have provided some really data that makes me think about technology from many angles. There is nothing inherently good or inherently fair or inherently neutral about technology. As long as human beings are involved, it cannot be neutral in any case. So when we look at the representation of women in the technology sector, and allow me to give you just a few numbers, women make up only 17.5% of the tech force worldwide, and it varies from country to country. More starking difference is in leadership positions. Only 5% of technology companies have women in the C-suite. In the G20 countries, which are supposed to be the most advanced in terms of technology development and adoption, women produce only 7% of information and communication technology patents. So it's a very unequal sector. I think that's why the Women in Tech movement is so important. Because when we look at the evolution of women's involvement in science and technology, STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or ICTs, information and communication technologies, we see a trend that is going downwards. In the US, and we have these figures in our report as well, which is called, by the way, I'd blush if I could. Repeating the response by Siri to sexually explicit comment from the user. In the United States, in the mid-1980s, 37% of computer science students were women. In 2015, that percentage had gone down to 17%. So it's almost half in the period where normally you would expect the other way around. Another observation we mentioned in our report is that especially in advanced industrialized countries where gender equality indicators are much, much better, you have far fewer women studying STEM and ICT-related studies, especially at the university and postgraduate levels. In Sweden, Belgium, in the Netherlands, it's below 10%. But when you look at countries where gender equality indicators are not so strong, you see many more women studying those disciplines at the universities. And one example is the Gulf region. Having said that, I should also point out that studying STEM, ICT, computer science at university does not necessarily translate these women go into the labor market in those countries, in the Gulf countries. But at least from an education perspective, I go back to your comment, Jutta, education is really important for technological advancement. It is a very interesting paradox. We did have the means to look into the deeper reasons for this observation, but I think it's important to investigate. So technology has the power to promote gender equality. It can be an incredible tool to promote gender equality. And I should also mention some of the incredible work, especially young women are doing. They are producing apps that are helping victims of female genital mutilation. They are producing apps that are helping women in conflict situations. They are producing apps that help women feel physically safe even in countries like France, where I currently live. But at the same time, we really have to be careful about who is producing this technology and how. At the moment, especially frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence are being produced by young men who are overwhelmingly white and Asian. Yeah. And the technology they produce reflects their own gender biases, their own worldviews. And we see that in voice assistant, which is the main focus of our first report, I'd blush if I could, where we indicate that because of the fact that 90% of the voice assistants, AI-powered voice assistants, are projected as female in voice, in persona, in identity, it is really shaping the way especially young kids and young men look at their relations with women in their lives, from their mothers to their sisters, to their girlfriends, to their wives. And the indication is that these voice assistants, because they represent an ideal woman in the minds of these young white and Asian men, they reflect very docile, very obedient, very servile female image that they then expect from real people in their lives. So to summarize, technology is very important. It has changed our lives. I mean, I feel much more safe in a city when I know that I can call a taxi with my smartphone, even if I speak the language in that country. I can go to places after dark without feeling vulnerable. And I think there are other applications that I mentioned which are really useful for gender equality, women's empowerment. But technology also has the potential to severely affect our perception of gender roles, and it has the possibility to reproduce and even worsen existing gender biases and gender stereotypes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I was actually going to ask you about your passion for the AI, because I remember reading an article from you about, I mean, is Siri sexist? And I mean, I noticed it too. I mean, I sometimes test. I mean, I really don't like to use Siri, but sometimes Siri actually, starts myself. And then I test something, on like a women word, and it just does not give me an answer. So you are so right about the whole programming. And I mean, I don't think sometimes, I always have to laugh when like women say, oh, I have nothing with technology. And then I'm like, well, your life is completely surrounded by technology. You don't even realize it. So you might as well start to show a little interest. And I think this is really interesting. And it's, Irene, you would like to say something?
Yeah, somebody said, well, you can't role model what you can't see. How many computer engineering professors are women? From the universities, from the schools, how many recruitment teams, tech recruitment teams include a lot of women who are not giving the handouts and making sure coffee is there. So how many coders are women? So you, as Gulser said so well, there is inequity embedded almost in the industry. What's interesting to me is the irony that technology is this new, innovative industry, but it functions, the leaders of it function like medieval men. There in that, when I heard that the CEO of Pinterest resigned because of yet another sexual assault, accusation. Think about what happened to Uber, the same thing with the CEO there, or somebody at Google. And so I'm thinking, what is it about this industry that makes men who lead these companies act like frat boys, like bad frat boys. What is it? I mean, we're not talking about microaggressions in these companies. You're talking about physical assaults. I was asking this from somebody who worked in one of these firms. I was asked to speak there. I said, tell me about the culture here. And she says, it's the culture of 40-year-old teenagers. I said, that makes sense. There is something very basic about sex discrimination practices in the world of technology that I don't see as much in other industries. So why is that? So that is how come you get the numbers. The low participation in STEM education, the low presence of women in leadership roles. The women in technology leave far earlier than men do. And you can see why, even with very advanced benefits, 6 months parental leave at many of these companies that you couldn't get in regular companies in the United States. But even with that, they leave, and all they talk about is the toxic environment. So what we're talking about in this whole session has to do with culture change that needs to happen in order for economic empowerment, whether in technology or anywhere else, to really be successful. And that's how come this world, the world of technology, if we can help to reshape it, it would be enormous, because technology is indeed all around us and it's key to our empowerment in the future. So in terms of my use, let me tell you, I am 72 years old. When I was the first and early activist, do you remember mimeograph? That's how we used to, hand out flyers, come to this meeting, da-da-da-da. Now, texting, and you get 1,000 people, crowds immediately. In activism, there's nothing like the power of technology to form, to convene, to get people together immediately. So we email everything, right? So that has been, in my work, the access, the universal global access it gives you, nothing like it. But I also see that the world continues the very issues we've been fighting. I was at Beijing at the UN Fourth World Conference 25 years ago. I was one of the organizers. SDG 5 gave specificity to that plan of action. And those issues, frankly, still remain. And 2030, 9 years, forget it. It ain't going to happen.
Well, that was my question to Tota. I would very much like to give you the last opportunity, because we have 5 more minutes.
Yes,
and then we have another amazing session. So I really would like to hear from Tota. Fast forward to 2030.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, do you think that we will, have met the goals, or what do you think it needs?
I will refer also to words of Irene and Gülse to answer that. And I think that while technology moved fast forward, the mentality didn't move at all. And that 40 years old teenagers is still there because we didn't work to change that together with technology. When you talk about products, I always mention the round chairs are made by men because they don't have handbags. So they never thought why to make a corner, because they don't have bag to put. Or in a downtown, you have tiles with gaps because the engineer, Bigfoot man who produced that tiles do not wear heels. And
Right.
that makes my life in downtown, get to have nice time, very difficult. But the same is with technology, as you mentioned, Asian white man and women, obedient women who answered that, is just continuing the stereotyping of women.
Yeah.
I will tell very shortly my story. In secondary school, there was a very special school opened that for talented children in mathematics. There were a lot of boys and 6 girls entered there. A professor of algebra or calculus, I don't know how you say in America, was a man who was very professional in mathematics, but whose duty was to expel as much as he can girls. 4 girls escaped that school in the first month. Another girl stayed only for 1 year, and she escaped fast out of that very heavy, very difficult school. So we didn't change that. We didn't change the mentality, the how to bring more girls, to create that critical mass of girls in STEM education, to together with boys to grow up, to get into the companies, to be in a leadership of a companies, and that to not be perceived as a cleaning lady or obedient lady who is there for their pleasure. So I think we need to work from the beginning, from the child. My father didn't bring me dolls. He brought me the box with 50 electrical experiments. And that was my favorite. That he brought the love for mathematics, for education, for engineering while I was very little. There was no rosy kitchen tools or nice hair doll. So I think that together with technology, well, technology was just speeding up. We didn't make that technology to be a friend of women. And we need to do that from the beginning. For 1,000 years, girls were not equal to boys. We need to work from the very, very, very beginning to change that.
Okay.
Do you know about this woman? She's an engineer from Stanford. She created a toy called Goldilocks because when it teaches girls to build things. Instead of buying a dollhouse, you build a dollhouse.
Yeah.
Because she got so upset, she went to a toy store. Everything was pink and dolls, etc. And so she decided, we're going to have toys that makes girls think of depth perception, engineers, how to solve things. So yes, absolutely, we have to start. Change will have to happen because everyone is engaged, whether it's parents and teachers, everybody. It takes a village, as somebody said.
Yeah. So we have one more minute, and I would like to just ask each one of you just to, just to say something. Is there something more you would like to share?
I would like leadership.
I would like to continue to make our tribe bigger, to work in alliances, and to change the world for the better together.
Thank you. Go, sir.
Yes, I would like to repeat what I said before. Technology is not inherently neutral or good. We have to make effort to make sure that it reflects the society in which it is developed with all its diverse elements. It has to be for the good and benefit of all. So it's very important to push for STEM education for girls. We know that they start leaving the STEM field around the time they reach puberty. So it's not only at the university level. It starts, as was said before, long before that. It transitions from primary to secondary education and throughout the secondary education. We definitely need role models. When we talk of a scientist, we always think of Einstein. There are so many women scientists whose names are not known because even the scientific journals do not mention them. But we get to know them through different platforms. So it's really important to make sure that we provide positive role modeling for young girls and young boys so that we can hope to achieve gender equality. We know we won't have it by 2030, but at least not too far from that date.
Wonderful, thank you. And Irene, how would you like to end this?
Change doesn't happen without pressure. I want women in technology to create the pressure for women in leadership in this industry where women are absent. It's great we're there as recruits at the bottom, 35% at least, but we need to be at the top. So let's push for that, because without us as leaders, we'll just be followers. Thank you for having me.
It would be wonderful if we could maybe have a session next year, hopefully in Sharjah. And I'm actually hereby inviting all three of you to join me again on stage, hopefully then. And let's see, because I think women are going to be crucial in building trust again, because it's something that we do from our heart. I think women lead from our heart. That was one of the results also of that research from Harvard Business Review. They said that during pandemic, empathy is one of the key that really gives people trust again. And if you look at the countries which had a female political leader, they actually came out of the of first wave and the second wave, you know, in a much more balanced, I mean, unfortunately, I come from a country which is not doing so well at the moment. There's a lot of emotional upheaval because the women the women, they don't feel heard. So I really think hopefully by next year, February, we will be able to look back on 2021 as well. And then we'll see that women were the ones who actually got us back right on track. So thank you so much. Please stay safe and stay healthy, Tota, also to you. And thank you for your contribution and your wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karine. And thank you, Jayumi.